Welcome back. NYC parks are essential to our city, providing playgrounds and natural spaces for residents and their families. However, budget cuts threaten the accessibility and enjoyment of these parks and green spaces. Organizations like New Yorkers for Parks advocate for the mayor to restore these funds. The project manager for research and policy at New Yorkers for Parks, Daniel Abram, joined me to discuss. Daniel, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, can you give us a little bit of an overview or background on New Yorkers for Parks and the work that you do?
Yeah, so New Yorkers for Parks is a research and advocacy organization. We've been around in different forums for 100 years or so. We focus a lot of our efforts on making sure that there is equitable access to parks as well as equitable maintenance to parks. We do a lot of this work through our research and advocacy. Our advocacy centers mostly around rallying, testifying at hearings, and then organizational partnership as well, working with other related organizations for coalition building. And then we share our research with communities on a pretty regular basis for both public education, but also to give the public tools to advocate for their own neighborhood.
Now, one of your most recent efforts is advocating for NYC Parks. Can you discuss, what NYC Parks is facing right now with budget cuts?
Yeah, so right now, the latest fiscal year 25 preliminary budget shows a $55 million cut to the Parks Department, and that's a $55 million cut to the maintenance budget. And so that would mean, bathrooms that are not clean or open, poor trash pickup on a regular basis, poor maintenance when it comes to playgrounds, park benches, lawns that are going unmowed. It also would result in an additional 600 jobs lost. These are jobs that the line items would be lost due to a hiring freeze. So it's actually pretty devastating for the Parks Department to be losing $55 million because they are already operating on such a shoestring budget. They need every dollar that they can get because they are managing a very robust park system as well in New York City.
Now, I must say that when it comes to the arts, parks, and just even certain areas of education, we're constantly seeing these budget cuts. Why are these departments always among those seeing these cuts?
That's a question I feel like I get often because it is a good question. Why are parks always the first thing to get cut? Why is education? Why is libraries? Why are these things the first to get cut? Honestly, it's a matter of political will. The mayor has made the promise of getting the Parks Department maintenance budget to 1% of the city's maintenance budget, operations budget, during his term. But obviously, we're headed in the wrong direction there with the $55 million cut and more job losses to the Parks Department. It really is a matter of political will. And there's the old saying that if you want to know where someone's priorities lie, take a look at their budget. It just kind of seems like our priorities have not lied very much with public space and with parks and the importance of parks and the importance of deepening community through parks programming and just having a place for recreation for people to go and enjoy public space. It's really unfortunate that there is no real good reason aside from political will, honestly.
Now, the Parks Department is a huge part of New York City, so I am very surprised that they're not getting this priority
Right.
because it's a huge part of the culture, the identity of our city. What does the budget for the parks go towards supporting?
So the maintenance budget goes towards, so there's the capital budget and the maintenance budget. Our focus has been heavily on the maintenance budget. The maintenance budget focuses on maintenance workers, gardeners, tree trimmers, PEP officers, recreation centers, programming in parks, for seniors and for children and for teens. So that all of that funding is going towards people on the ground doing the work day to day, making sure that parks are in a cleanly state and also making sure that bathrooms are open, making sure that bathrooms are functional, making sure that park benches are able to be sat on a beautiful day because they're not broken, and making sure that slides are fixed and there aren't any sharp edges or just really, really focusing on the condition in parks, the quality of parks. That is where the maintenance budget's going.
Now, you talked about some programs, which I think is super important because if you are from New York City, or maybe if you don't go out often, you'd be surprised that like almost every park has like a building that does something for the
Right.
community. Can you talk about the risk, community members face in regard to some of those programs?
Yeah, so there are some programs that are being cut. The swim expansion program, which would swim safety expansion, which would mean teaching more children how to swim, which is a problem already in New York.
Yeah.
The trail formalization program, which would allow for children and for anyone really to walk through the 10,000 acres of natural areas that we have in New York City. But aside from those programs, there's also the second shift program, which is implemented during the summer, where there are 100 hotspots in parks that get the most use in New York City, where there's a second shift that comes in and cleans the bathrooms, make sure that the bathrooms are open later during the summer because it's a longer day, and folks are in the park longer. So they're preparing bathrooms and they're preparing the park not just for that night, but also for the next morning, so that the next shift coming in the morning is able to kind of get right to work on whatever else is going on in the park at that moment, instead of cleaning up the previous night and then also having to do everything else. So the second shift is a really important program that would be lost with these budget cuts.
Now, the executive director for NY4P, New Yorkers for Parks, told AMNY that the Parks Department has always been working with a very limited budget. This has been happening for over 40 years.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the history behind that?
Yeah, the Parks Department is annually under the threat of budget cuts. The last time the Parks Department, we advocate for 1% of the city's budget for the Parks Department. And so that would equate to about $1 billion for 1,700 park sites, 30,000 acres of parkland. I think it's 14 miles of beach. And so the budget has been consistently under that. It's been between 0.5 and 0.6% since 1976. The last time the Parks Department was above 1% was 1976, 1977, around that time, a little bit before then. And so it's been consistently just not enough to care for the amount of park space we have. For example, the number of PEP officers, there's about 300 PEP officers. They all work in pairs, so that's 150 pairs. That's simply not enough PEP officers for as many acres, 30,000 acres of parkland. It's just not possible for them to be in every place that they need to be. So the maintenance budget would go towards additional PEP officers, additional urban rangers, additional people doing maintenance and park cleanup, pickup, yeah, it's something where the Parks Department has gotten by on a shoestring budget, but the people who suffer the most are the people in the less premier, smaller parks, which are the community parks for so many New Yorkers.
Now, I kind of want to expand on that because we're approaching summer. And in communities like the Bronx, we love going to the park. People will have parties, just kind of enjoy each other's time in the sun. How is this going to affect us, especially now that more people are going to be utilizing the parks this summer?
Yeah, I mean, it'll mean, worse conditions of bathrooms. Worse conditions of bathrooms that may not be working, overflowing trash, unmowed lawns, tree limbs that have not been trimmed, and it could be potentially dangerous. There's completely a lack of programming. Programming has fallen off of cliff when it comes to recreational center programming. And recreation centers kind of act more as gyms and not necessarily the civic and community hubs that they could be. So for the summer itself, again, the second shift is really important. So that will mean probably a less enjoyable experience in parks for park goers. If you're a beach goer or a pool goer, it could mean closed pools due to short staffing, because lifeguards are part of the Parks Department. And so, that could mean the same thing for beaches. Beaches could potentially be less safe, or at the very least, not as clean as they could be.
Now, with that said, the parks do more than just provide enjoyment. Your organization found that they're also essential, or just recognized as essential, for public health. Can you expand on that finding?
Yeah. There's a little bit over $1 billion annual reduction in healthcare costs to New Yorkers with access to public space. So the study found that there's roughly about 2 days a week in public space, in green space, can improve mental health. So yeah, that $1 billion annual reduction for healthcare costs to New Yorkers is is in some ways priceless.
And how can preserving and properly caring for New York City parks also aid in making New York City just an overall greener, more sustainable, city?
Yeah, parks are a cared for park is an incredible asset to New York City, which is an island. And when the city floods in different areas, which will continue to happen in the coming years, parks, when they're properly maintained, get to be the sponges and the tools for stormwater diversion that they're supposed to be. And that also relates to the increases in heat. Last week we had a pretty intense heat wave. There was a very stark difference between being in a park under a tree and being exposed on the sidewalk somewhere. And if there's proper maintenance of the park system, then the tree canopy is also healthy, which allows for increased shade. There's a reduction in ambient temperatures by 10 degrees near parks. So parks are an incredible asset for reducing heat and for stormwater diversion, which we'll continue to deal with in the coming years.
And I think it's so interesting because these are things that I've never known before about parks. I always just associate them with fun and a place to play, but they actually do so much for our communities. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can you quickly just tell us a little bit more about how your organization will soon host community conversations so people can learn about things just like this?
Sure, yeah. So we have been meeting with community boards, specifically 5 community boards with the least amount of parks and open space. They are in Central Harlem, East Flatbush, Bensonhurst in in Brooklyn, the Fordham and University Heights here in the Bronx, and then also the Long Island City and Woodside community. So all of these communities share the same issue where they have a lack of parks and open space, a lack of access to parks and open space. They also have a lack of tree canopy in different areas. And so we are meeting with these communities to elevate these issues, to talk about these issues with them, but then eventually at the end of the summer produce a report that provides actionable and a menu of actionable solutions for these communities to, again, take for themselves and advocate. But also to highlight these to our political electeds, to let them know that these are the priority communities that need the most help right now, because this is an urgent need. As heat increases and as flooding increases on a regular basis, these are the communities that are going to need the most help. And these communities also have worse health outcomes, and so parks will help with that issue in these communities.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and having this really interesting and important conversation, because I definitely learned a lot of new things today. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
To learn more about New Yorkers for Parks and their fight to protect park funding, please go to their website at ny4p.org. Stay tuned. We have more for you right after this.